Listen up, Gotham.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Hiya, Buttons. It's me, Harley Quinn.
This is Batman.
This is Robin.
Tune into the Bat Fanatic podcast.
The Bat Fan Addict Podcast.
The Bat Fanatic Podcast.
The Bat Fanatic Podcast with Sammy Warmhands.
With Sammy Warmhands.
The Bat Fan Addict Podcast. Bat Fan Addict Podcast.
Although, Sam, you might think about changing the name.
Hey everybody, it's the Dark Knight of Rap, Sammy Warmhands, and this is the Bat Fanatic Podcast. I'll be joined by my Season 4 co-hosts, Gramps and Dunk, and I appreciate you guys listening while we find our chemistry together. We've done about half a dozen episodes, and they're just better every time. I want to shout out our friend of the show and Season 4 sponsor, TNK Comics and Collectibles. You can follow on shortboxed.com/TNK Comics or on Instagram for claim sales and a full list of upcoming events at The Nando Night. That's KNIGHT. Now, today we are returning to Tom King as well as The Riddler with our first of the entire box set series, Batman One Bad Day. Before we get into the topic today, and Gramps and I were talking about this a little bit, I recently got my first Marvel books, and they are Star Wars Darth Vader comics written by Charles Soule. You know, I've been on a massive Star Wars kick ever since we went to MegaCon, because right after we went to Disney World. So I've been binging everything since I've been home, you know, all the movies that I've seen, all the series that I hadn't seen yet, having a great time. And I thought, God, you know, I bet there's some good Star Wars comics. So I do the research and I find this, and it's like, oh man, these are really expensive. They're out of print. I do some digging, find one still sealed in town at cover price. Fuck yeah. Found the second volume really cheap on a scratch and dent for $15. It shows up still sealed, perfect condition. I'm like batting 1,000. Everything's going perfect, right? And then I start following Charles Soule on Instagram. And guess what? He was at fucking MegaCon.
Oh, shit.
And I had no idea who he was until a week later.
That's funny. My first experience with Charles Soule, I'd gone to New York Comic Con, and he was just kind of sitting there. He wasn't even at a booth or anything like that. He was just sitting there, and I think he had a stack of books with him. I think he was actually kind of working while he was at the con. Yeah. I've heard him in interviews say that he does most of his comic writing. He'll go to a bar and just sit there with like a notebook and write down his plot.
Like do an outline.
Yeah. So I saw him and I knew who he was, but then it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, he was announced as the Daredevil writer. And I was like, oh my God, I should have just, but
I wish I knew.
I did see him down here. He wrote a book, and the name escapes me. I just know it was about this evil wizard that came to Earth and was supposed to destroy Earth, but then fell in love with Earth and went on some crazy adventures. And him and this artist.
You mean Omni-Man? That's what it sounds like.
No,
is Omni-Man.
No, him and this artist traveled cross country in this van, just doing book signings. And they came down here to Dallas at a small shop. I mean, this place was tiny. And they get out and they're dressed like wizards and all this stuff. It was really, he's a really cool dude.
That's funny.
But yes, I love his Darth Vader run.
Yeah, dude, it's incredible. I burned through, both volumes here, which is the equivalent of the 25-issue omnibus with, I think it was Vader Annual number 2 tacked on at the end, which is like a perfect lead into Rogue One, which is great. So immediately I put this down and I'm watching Andor and Rogue One and, having a great time with it. But anyway, I just thought that was frustratingly hilariously frustrating, something like that, that, I become a major fan of this guy's work and then find out that I could have met him.
You suck.
I do. I suck as a person and I should die.
You should read his Daredevil run. I don't know if you like
Don't
Daredevil.
Tell me what to do.
Will you please read his Daredevil run?
I've never read any Daredevil books, actually.
Oh.
Ever.
Will you please read his Daredevil run? I think you'd
Like I
it.
said, this is the first Marvel book that I've bought in 30 years. Where I left off, it was Jim Lee X-Men and Scarlet Spider. That's the last shit that I read.
Daredevil and Batman kind of parallel each other in so many ways.
And that Ben Affleck has played both of them.
Especially if you read any of Frank Miller's run, and then that's what guided him and led him up into writing Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah, I have read that just in becoming familiar with his history. And I also know that Tim Sale did, is it Daredevil Yellow or something like that?
Yeah.
That's pretty acclaimed as well.
It's a very good book. It's almost like a year one-esque type of retrospective of Matt Murdock and how he became Daredevil and dealing with his father and whatnot. But yeah, it's a really good read, and Tim's art in that is just amazing.
That was around the time of like When in Rome, Catwoman, right? Like when he was stepping up his game and doing more of the ink wash and that kind of stuff.
I think he did Spider-Man Red, Captain America Blue, and I want to say a Hulk Green.
You guys are just mentioning all these stories I don't read.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know either, but I know of them.
Yeah. And they're just one-off stories.
I mean, that sounds like a pretty good way to get into it and get a taste for it. You know, it's the same way that I got into reading Batman again as an adult, where it's like, I don't know how to jump into continuity, you know? And so I'm like, I started on like the Black Glove and RIP, and I'm like, this shit's fucking weird. I have no idea what's going on, you know?
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, well, you get the Killing Joke and you get Long Halloween, and cool, these are contained stories that make sense to me. And so that was kind of how I got into reading DC again. So it makes perfect sense that finding some sort of contained Marvel story like this Vader is great, because, I mean, this is set immediately after episode 3, leading up to, like I said, Rogue One, and, you know, then into New Hope. So it's kind of just the untold sequel of the prequels that kind of bridges that gap.
So this Vader run that he wrote, it is actually considered canon.
Yeah, that's what I was reading.
It's basically the equivalent of the Vader movie that we're never going to get. So if you ever want to know what he does after he stands up and goes, no, that's where it starts.
Dude, I don't know if you guys have watched the Obi-Wan series, but we finally caught up on that. And first of all, I wasn't sure at first, but by the second half, I really enjoyed it. And it was crazy to me because I was like, man, James Earl Jones sounds fucking perfect. Like in Rogue One, he sounds like an old man. I was like, in this one, he sounds awesome. And then I'm reading the IMDb trivia, and it's not fucking real. He gave him permission to use an AI version of his voice. I'm like, that's nuts.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he like performed the lines and then they ran it through a filter, or if they just fucking typed in the dialogue or what. But
it's kind of like what they did with rebuilding Harrison Ford in the new Indiana Jones movie. They have so much footage, and in James Earl Jones' case, they have so much audio throughout all his movies that they just plug that in, and it will build the sequence of whatever words they type in.
Yeah, it's nuts, man. Like, I'm not a proponent of AI unless it's like a very fixed purpose, like, oh, in Photoshop, you can use AI to upscale your poor quality picture, or, you know, a simple function like that. Great. But when, you know, there's stuff like, you know, my hero is George Carlin, and there's like an entire AI special that someone just made.
Oh, they're
like,
getting
what
sued.
would George Carlin do nowadays?
Oh.
Yeah. And his daughter is suing them. And I listened to about 1 minute of it, and it's fucking the worst thing I've ever heard. Not only is the voice all weird and wrong, but like he's making that most hacky jokes imaginable, and he's a fucking genius. You know, like he would never say any of this shit.
Every right to get sued with that nonsense. I listened to like the first like 5 minutes, and I was like, what the hell is this? I'm like, no.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fucking terrible. I mean, he's one of those guys. I've memorized fucking, you know, his last like 10 specials pretty much, because I watched them so many times. And so when I watch even a moment of this, I'm like, oh, this is wrong. And at the same time, I was in the middle of binging like 25 years of his shit. So I was like the most up to date I could possibly be when I watched that. I'm like, this is fucking embarrassing.
Yeah, this wasn't it.
So anyway, fuck AI bullshit. We have a book to talk about. Dunk, you were saying something about last week's title. We did Riddler Year One.
Yeah, well, we kind of did mention it. We mentioned how the story kind of pretty much flows going into watching the Batman. And I was in the middle of watching the Batman before we started recording. So I decided to finish what I was watching. There's so many relatable things. So I watched it again the following day. I got home and I was like, you know what? I'm going to watch this again because it's so
This is a 3-hour film.
Yeah. Screw sleep. I don't sleep.
That's a commitment.
I'm on that Batman schedule. I don't need sleep. 4 hours tops. And
Jesus,
it was so freaking good. Even today, like I was talking to my coworker and I was like, yeah, we got a podcast tonight. And she's like, oh, what's the podcast about? And I was like, oh, this book I have to read, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, but last week we read this book and you know what happened? I watched the Batman twice after reading the book. And she was like, why is that? And I was like, well, you should read this book too. Because then you watch the Batman and you have a better understanding of everything that's going on.
That's awesome.
So I'm going to bring the book to work.
Now you're spreading the gospel, man.
Yeah, man. We said it last week where it was just the pieces to the puzzle started fitting, right?
Yeah.
It's so Riddler-like, right? So just Riddler. That's everything about it, just the Riddler. It was like, if you didn't read this, you might understand some of this, but if you read it, you're going to be like, Eureka. And that's exactly what I felt that happened.
Yeah, and I felt the same thing because I mentioned this on the episode, but I read it and then watched the film, and it was just like, oh my God, everything feels so much more real because all of that time he's off camera, we know so much more now, because he's really only popping up for another murder or whatever.
Yeah, in a film that long, I feel like they could have trimmed 20 to 30 minutes to give us that backstory and kind of make that book into part of that movie. And it would have fit seamlessly and it would have made it so much bigger and better.
Yeah, with all the dramatic pauses, you could have done it.
I don't know about seamlessly because when that movie came out and people were complaining about the runtime, we had our full plot analysis of it on the podcast, but I really felt like this movie is so deliberate where every scene ties in following the breadcrumbs. I didn't know what you could possibly trim aside from like the epilogue, where the Joker shows up for some fucking reason, but like for a 3-hour movie, it doesn't drag, everything leads into the next thing. Everything is setting up another plot point. So I don't know how they would fucking do it, but I'm so glad that we have this anyway.
Yeah. At least this was written, right? At least it was published. We have that at least.
Bringing it back around, it's like the Vader book after episode 3, leading into, like you said, Rogue One, leading into A New Hope. So
yeah, and now it had been about 10 years probably since I had watched the prequels, maybe 8 years, something like that, and now I never have to watch them again. I can just read these books, and they're so much better.
You really only need to watch episode 3, and then.
Even that is just unpleasant to me.
There's like the last maybe
the last 45 minutes maybe. Yeah, sure.
That's all we ever wanted to see anyway.
Have you heard of Project 4K77?
No.
There was a guy named Harmy who decided to go through, and I think it's called rotoscoping, where he took all of the special editions and went frame by frame and removed all the extra added CGI shit and replaced it with like an old DVD or Laserdisc version or something that was like the original trilogy version. Because, since 1997, we haven't got those. I haven't seen them since they were on VHS. They're all the fucked with versions. That's all you can get. So that existed for a while. And then these guys decided, Project 4K77, just a team of strangers on the internet, that they were going to track down original film reels from theaters and shit, do 4K scans of them and clean them up and color grade them and have proper restorations of the original trilogy. So this shit exists. If you go to the StarWarsTrilogy.com, it will explain everything, but I'm very excited to fucking watch because I've watched a lot of comparisons on YouTube, a lot of clips of what they've done, and it looks incredible.
See, and I'm so old, I remember standing in line to see those movies.
Yeah, man, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Like I grew up on those VHS tapes, and the first one I got to see in the theater was the worst one. The only day of my life that I skipped school was the premiere of The Phantom Menace.
Oh, wow.
There was so much hype behind that.
Not only was I let down, but I didn't even see the other ones.
Wow.
It wasn't until like they came out on video that I got around to seeing the other ones because I was like, no, fuck that. It's not the same.
Can't blame you on that.
All right, so today, Batman One Bad Day, The Riddler. This is the first in a series of, I believe, 6 that we're going to cover here on season 4. This one is written by Tom King, art by Mitch Gerrads, lettered, just like Riddler Year One, by Clayton Cowles. Now, was this your introduction to this series? Had you read any of these before?
I didn't buy this immediately when it first came out, but I kept hearing so much through the Bat Force and just people talking about it. And I'm a big fan of Mitch Gerrads. It was like that story that it would just never go away. And I was like,
Yeah.
I guess I need to read this. So luckily found a copy at my local shop that still had it several months later after it had already been released. After I think some of the other ones had been released, that I got a copy of this.
Dave, you're new to it, right?
Yeah, I bought the original issue, but I got it signed and graded, and I couldn't crack that open. So I went over and bought a new one.
Bought a reader copy.
And the new
Yeah,
one
okay.
you have is a variant, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
got
it's a totally different cover.
Yeah, it's a Jim Lee variant, which also comes with a really funny story. Before we get started, one of our sponsors and good friend of the podcast, Nando Knight, he got this book signed by Tom and Mitch at San Diego Comic-Con. And Mitch and Tom asked him to go over to Jim and ask him, why did he draw a blonde Bruce Wayne? And what was he doing with the Riddler hoodie gang? And Jim Lee, President Jim Lee, drew this cover without having the story in hand. So he had no idea what the story was actually about or the premise of it. And this is the cover he drew. Pretty sick cover. Also, in a way, I kind of feel it correlates with the story, but once we get into it.
Okay, that I'm interested in because for him to be like, I don't know, they didn't give me anything. That's
President Jim Lee.
All right. So for me, this was maybe the first Tom King story that connected with me. It was either this or Killing Time, which was around the same time, I think, because I had read 20 issues of his Batman run. I just didn't get the fucking dialogue. It was so strange to me. I bowed out like halfway through Jokes and Riddles. And so I probably said this because we reviewed Tom on the Swamp Thing episode. But anyway, the story opens with point of view shots from John Oates. He's just leaving work while talking to his wife on the phone. They're having a parenting argument about showing some tough love to their 11-year-old daughter. In the elevator, he talks about her again, the daughter, with a coworker who gets in the elevator. And when he gets downstairs, John only gets a few steps outside before the panels go black. On the 4th page, we switch from John's point of view to a security camera. As he steps onto the sidewalk, the Riddler is seen walking up behind him with a gun. And with no hesitation, he shoots John in the head and then walks up to the security camera and smiles. He's holding a little business card, note card, with the bat symbol. The splash page here is our title card. Pretty heavy fucking intro.
I'm just amazed at the way Mitch creates this look of CCTV surveillance camera. You know,
Yeah, it looks great.
Second, I'm totally shocked that, I mean, it's not fully in view, but we basically get a headshot, and this isn't a Black Label book.
Yeah.
That's pretty unheard of in most comics.
I was reading this and actually flipped back to the cover at one point because I was like, hang on, is this Black Label? Because this is pretty fucking dark.
It would be rated R if they didn't bleep out some of the words.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's one of those mainline stories that they put out there with a whole bunch of fucking bleeps and stuff, which drives me crazy. I think Killing Time was the same way, where he has a lot of vulgarity in there.
Should have been Black Label.
But all of it's fucking censored. And so I'm like, well, hang on a second. I curse a lot and I don't understand the form of this sentence.
Dude, that was me the entire book.
I know. I'm counting the characters. Like, okay, is he saying dickhead? Is he saying? Maybe this one's shit face? I don't know.
I was like, what would I say? And I'm like, I don't even know what he's trying to say here. I'm like, what the hell's going on?
That's half the fun is
Yeah.
putting in your own
That's
expletives.
why it took me so long to finish
It's a Mad Lib story. There you go.
But yeah, I mean, this page or these 2 pages right here, I mean, just out of the gate, I'm already loving what Mitch is doing here. Again, he's kind of like the Riddler year 1. He's one of these artists that I call it distressed realism.
Yeah.
Although he gets a little closer and a little tighter than what Stefan did. I mean, he does the artwork digitally, so he's also doing the colors as well. So
I didn't realize that until I met him at a con last summer, and he had his pages out, and they're all like artist proofs or whatever. You know, it's like a 1-of-1 print. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't realize that he was digital because, you know, he works traditional at the shows. But yeah, man, it's probably the only way you could accomplish some of this stuff, you know?
yeah, and his color palettes that he does, not just in this book, but everything else, it's part of how he creates this feeling that you're in Gotham, you're in the grime, you're in the shit, you know?
Yeah.
I love that.
And I also like that this whole thing has a green hue to it. Like the flashbacks are a totally different vibe, sunny daylight, and like everything in this one is green shaded, rainy, dark. And so even scenes the Riddler's not in, it feels like a Riddler book, you know?
Even John Oates' shirt has, you know, the green patterns. And it made me wonder after reading this and reading it again and reading it and now discussing it, if that may be one of the reasons why he got targeted. Riddler was like, you're going to wear green? Okay, it's you.
That guy. There you go.
Here's some red. On the first page, I was like dozed off because I was like, oh, his daughter's trying to be sick. I remember those days not wanting to do something or going to school and wanted to play sick and then just sitting at home and watching The Price is Right or MTV or or Road Rules. And my
love connection.
Yeah, my mind went that way. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. There's a story about this guy. All right, what's going on?
That's a Tom King thing. Like we even talked about in the Swamp Thing episode. It's bookended by this sports announcer on the radio. And he's talking about the team and what they got to do after halftime and all this shit. And like, there's only a bit of it that's loosely thematically related. And the rest of it, you're just having to fucking read these guys' conversation that you never see and has nothing to do with anything. And this one kind of opens the same way where all it does is it's establishing this man has a family. You could have just had this whole first page silent and just have him putting away his things and show the picture of the wife and kid on the desk. And it would be maybe even more effective. But yeah, one of the things where I was kind of thrown off by his really wordy way of writing when I read his earlier stuff. And in this one, it works, but it's definitely a kind of a signature of his from what I can gather.
Yeah, you're exactly right. He plays the slow burn. He builds and builds and builds. And there's times, even in this book, as we go through it, there's times where I didn't know who was speaking.
I know, because it's all done in narration bubbles and no one's on the page.
You know, with some books, even the inner monologue or sometimes the word bubbles have a color shade so you can identify who is speaking. Batman will have a gray. With this one, that was my one thing that was throwing me off a little bit. And with Tom's writing style, yes, it sometimes you're like, okay, who's speaking? But you have to read the whole thing. And then it always reveals, it always comes around and makes sense once you continue to read.
And I think it's maybe why I enjoyed this one more is because it's a one shot versus other times when you're only getting 20 pages and then you're like, well, what the fuck does that mean?
Well,
and then you got to wait a month to find out. You know?
Well, that happened a lot during the Batman run. I was like, why did I just read this book?
Yeah. This issue doesn't make sense. All right. So Gordon interrogates the Riddler and ignores his predictable onslaught of non-answers and riddles.
All I could think about on this page was how much he looked like Michael Stipe from REM. I was like, what's the frequency, Kenneth? You know?
That's funny. I could see that.
I mean, it looks just like him. Am I wrong?
No, I get it.
Yeah.
But Riddler gets his attention when he asks how was Joker able to get you and your daughter alone in the apartment? And then he says, it was my idea. I was the one. I figured it out. It was just too easy, you know, so I let him have it. And then Gordon grabs him by the throat, and Riddler then taunts him again, but this time about his affair with Detective Essen.
Year one.
And what became of her, referring to also her murder in No Man's Land.
Right. So this first little interview right here, you've got a Killing Joke reference, and then you've got a year one reference followed behind that. So
yeah, from the surveillance footage that really grabs your attention, and then fulfilling that promise with this interrogation, I'm like, oh, god damn, you know, and it's like, okay, now I see why they're calling the series One Bad Day, because not only is it his origin, but it literally ties into Killing Joke.
Yeah, literally.
He repeats the riddle from earlier, asking, what house do you enter blind but leave seeing? The answer is a schoolhouse, and this serves as a segue to flashback to young Edward still in school. The headmaster berates him for only getting a 92%, which I'll remind you when we come to rate the book at the end, that 92 is bad for him. So but he's saying that he shouldn't have enrolled him in AP English at such a young age. Edward protests that he memorized the entire textbook, but the teacher added a riddle that wasn't part of the text. Ashamed, he bends over and is beaten with a book. As he cries out, we realize that the headmaster is his father.
And he's like beating him and saying, are you the son of a whore?
Yeah, that was wild.
Like, no, father, I'm your son, you know.
But look how Mitch draws the face of the headmaster while he's doing this. I mean, it is like intense. It's distorted.
There's spit coming out.
Yeah, it doesn't even look like a human face in a way. You can't even see his eyes. It's just black. It really gives you the sense of motion as well.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Present day, there's a brief montage of John Oates' funeral, and as the people scatter to leave, one man remains. The widow recognizes him as Bruce Wayne, who says he didn't know her husband, but read about him in the newspaper. As they walk together, she seems overwhelmed by the funeral and the reception and the disbelief that he's gone and all of the stuff. And of course, Bruce is uniquely equipped to understand her state of mind and allows her a moment to vent.
Yeah, she's asking him if he knew her husband. He's like, no, he read about it. And then she invites him to the reception afterward, and she's like, you know, going on about how there's going to be sandwiches and you can stay if you want and all this stuff. And just rambling, and Bruce knows that her mind is just gone at this point. She's trying to be nice, but she's really not there. And he's like, no, it's okay. Take your time. So we get to see a very human side of Bruce that we don't see very much.
And I like that moment too, because later on we're going to see some hardcore Batmaning. So good to have the balance. But back at school, and we're going to cut back and forth a lot in this story, young Edward is faced with another unexpected riddle in his test. Which word in the English language is most commonly spelled incorrectly? He thinks about it very hard and answers, enough. The teacher tells him the answer is incorrectly. The word spelled incorrectly is incorrectly. And he said, anyone can parrot answers, learn things from someone else and repeat them. But I'm trying to teach you guys critical thinking skills.
And even on that question, it says, riddle me this. Catchphrase of Riddler right there.
Yeah.
Right.
His trigger.
It's funny that, you know, in Riddler year one, puzzles are a sanctuary for him. And in this one, it's the polar opposite of like, these fucking things are killing me. And much like Paul Dano's in, I'm going to inflict this misery on everyone else. You know?
Yeah, because he is so rigid in his linear thinking that everything has to be zeros and ones. And what this teacher is trying to tell him or teach him is that, like you said, critical thinking, use your knowledge. You study the book, but look outside the book sometimes.
Yeah, I think he uses the word recontextualize at one point. Like, I'm trying to get you to also just examine what's being said to you.
Right.
And look beyond that at the intention, you know,
Right.
which I think is great.
The point isn't just to regurgitate answers, it's to, you know,
Yeah.
have a sense of the world around you.
So Edward returns to his father's office, now empty, which for some reason has a gun in the desk drawer. And he sits in his father's chair, puts that gun to his head, and it clicks 3 times before he realizes the gun is unloaded. He then bends over and waits for the inevitable beating, which this is sad, but I just have to say, as I'm saying this out loud, when he bends over in an empty room, it reminds me a little bit of Luis Guzman in the movie Waiting. When he's in the freezer with his balls hanging out.
You've been goated.
That guy!
Hold on. Side note, I've been goaded by 3 guys at the same time.
Oh my God.
That's fucking teamwork.
Yeah, I walked into a room holding a pizza, and I was like, what the?
Like, you guys aren't getting any of this. Okay, now it jumps around quite a bit faster. Batman dangles a man in a tank of shark-infested water, despite his willingness to talk. He's like, I'll give you anything you want, whatever you want, and don't dunk me again. You know. On another page, an inmate slits his own throat after saying, well, a bet is a bet. And he had bet that Nigma in the neighboring cell couldn't name every cast member in a film from the 1930s.
But what kind of person makes a bet where like, I'll kill myself if you win this bet?
They must have been at it for a long time of like, he stumps him, he stumps him, he stumps him. It's like, okay, you know what? This, you're never going to, never, I will bet you fucking, you know.
Another thing, look at the name on the door.
Is Bert something?
Weston Burt.
Oh, West and Bert.
Yes.
There you go.
Adam West.
That's
Burt.
perfect.
Yeah.
That's I looked at it and I was like, yeah, I don't know that one. Because in the beginning, and I was going to save this for Easter eggs, but in the beginning, the murder takes place on the corner of Ween and Giordano.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always those types of shout outs to the other writers, which I appreciate. But this one I didn't get until now we're saying it out loud. That's great. In the Batmobile, Batman talks to Gordon on the phone. And this is the part where it's unclear for a while what's happening. They find Film Freak's body with instructions on how to turn his death and dismemberment into a film festival submission. Gordon says he can't tie it to Nigma, and he mentions the inmate suicide being an improbable link because they soundproofed the cells so many years ago. But they're putting him into solitary regardless. This whole thing is kind of a jumbled mess, if you ask me. Gordon can't figure out why this crime has no riddles to solve, and it doesn't fit his MO. And the only lead they have is one of Nigma's former henchmen who was found washed up to shore and badly beaten. Batman's like, I don't know anything about that.
Whoops.
That guy's not talking. Riddler's not talking. Their only hope, he says, is Batman. He'll talk to you.
So you can see from the prior scene where he's giving this guy a dunk bath with sharks that he's really been leaning on him for some information that only this guy would know. Because I was like, well, why is he going to this little shanty house? Obviously, that guy kind of leaked some information saying, I know who his dad is. I know who his family is. Everything.
Right.
I'll tell you everything.
Just as we're seeing him drive around, he witnesses a mugging in the street or an assault in the street and shoots some kind of rope out of the Batmobile that ties this guy up as he's driving by. He does a fucking drive-by rescue while he's on the way to investigate something else. I'm like, I don't even need to stop for this
I'm not going to
asshole.
bother with this. Pew.
Yeah. So again, lots of Batmaning. Back at school, Edward demands that the professor give advanced notice for any riddles on the next test because it's unethical. It's not right what you're doing, teaching outside of the test. And
Also goes against school policy.
yeah, he's like, I'm going to report you.
My dad.
When the professor explains that it's okay not to know the answers sometimes, and I'm teaching you to face obstacles and overcome them, Edward asks him point blank, why do you hate me? At Arkham, a guard delivers Riddler's breakfast.
Oh, this scene right
The guard
here.
thanks him for a riddle that he got to share with his daughter at home. They seem very familiar, lighthearted mood. But when he puts the tray through the slot in the door, Riddler slams down on the tray. It jams the guard's fingers between the tray and the top of the slot, right? And actually breaks his fingers. And he continues to smash on this as the guy is screaming until the guard's fingers actually come off. They're like chopped the tips off. All the while he calmly tells a riddle.
And he
That
drew
was a
the
180.
nubs, bleeding, squirting blood out.
Yeah, pretty hardcore. And honestly, I think the only thing I don't like about this is just the likelihood of him actually chopping off his fingers, especially all of them with this move. But I think breaking them works the same in this context.
I mean, King and Mitch Gerrads are giving us a view of a very different Riddler. In the past, in other stories that I've read, it's always been that whimsical, here's a riddle, catch me if you can, outsmart me, I'm better than you, Batman, but oh man, you caught me. And this one, he's just pissed off.
I like how they tie it up at the end too and sort of explain why is this guy just so off the rails and just savage in this story, because this feels totally different, like you said.
Yeah, this is like Joker moves, killing it random, being ultra violent.
Yeah, indiscriminate violence.
Yeah, this is not typical Riddler saying, I want to talk to Batman. Okay, you're not going to let me talk to Batman? This guy's getting his fingers whacked off. Talk to Batman.
You said whacked off. Batman opens a door to find the elderly headmaster with his shotgun in hand.
Hold on. Before he opens that door, first thing I thought looking at that house,
that shack.
First thing I said, I was like, yo, Marshall Matters LP.
Oh, yeah. That's the cover. Yeah, it's the Dresden house, man.
Yeah. I was like, yo, I want that panel now.
That's funny. Yeah, see if you got that page, man. Hang it up. So Nigma's dad sitting there, old ass man now, got the shotgun. Batman starts talking and the guy shoots. Batman keeps talking and he shoots again.
Matrix.
And they're pretty much point blank. And Batman barely just pulls up his cape and turns his shoulder away a little bit, slightly dodges it. And he never raises his voice, but he lets him know that those shots have lost him any mercy that he may have been obliged to offer before. And the headmaster says, my son is an idiot, before describing the myriad ways in which he was ahead of every child prodigy in a league of his own. And yet they haven't spoken in 30 years because Edward chose to throw it all away. All that potential thrown away on riddles and games. Enigma, he says. How clever. Batman then asks, at the end of the scene, where is his mother?
It's always about the mother.
Back at school, Edward starts a fire as a diversion, then breaks in to get the test key for the next exam. At Arkham, Nigma is transferred to another location. But when he doesn't comply, Gordon tells the armed guards, just fire the rubber bullets. He's like, I'm not going to play around with his fucking games. Just shoot. But Riddler interrupts by speaking to the closest guard, who's got a gun drawn on him, and names the guy's children one by one as well as their school. Then he names all the other guards and reminds them, I've escaped from Arkham a dozen times before. All it takes is one of these guys to crack under the pressure, and he shoots another guard.
Yeah.
Gordon is then surrounded by these guys shooting each other. When we zoom out, because this is all very close, we're getting a lot of 9-panel sequences in this book that are very much like Brian Ball Killing Joke style. And this is another one where a lot of small panels, quick action. And then when it zooms out, we're seeing Gordon surrounded by all the bodies. He's on his knees saying, Jesus Christ. And then Enigma asks if he can try calling the Batman again.
That scene right there, I was like, how afraid do you have to be to start shooting your other coworkers? I mean, obviously they're trying to first shoot Enigma, but the other guards are like, dude, I got to put him out. And then it just starts a big bloodbath.
Well, and I love that because, like, I thought this scene was fucking brilliant. I've never seen anything quite like it. You know, we've seen in the Under the Red Hood animated film, Joker is, you know, escaping and he meets with Black Mask and he breaks the glass on the desk and he slits the guy's throat and he grabs that guy's gun and shoots the other guy. You know, we've seen villains be able to take everybody down in clever ways and shocking ways. But to do this just with the threat, you know, that I would link to like The Dark Knight, right? Hey, you want to give me that gun, son? Why? Because my daughter's in the hospital right now, or wife's in the hospital right now. Like, yep, that'd be why. You know, like they get motivation that is so deep and so primal, that instinct to protect your family, you know, that I love how this plays out. You know, not to mention just whatever commentary that trigger happy cops are like, okay, sure, we'll shoot the guy. Oh, wait, you're going to what? Okay, I'll shoot my guy.
Yeah, that changed.
Whatever,
real quick.
someone's getting shot.
And he's just like laying down too. He's like, let me just lay over here because everyone's shooting each other. I'm going to make sure I don't get hit.
Yeah.
And these guards, I mean, sometimes I have to pull myself out of the book and think, okay, we're in Gotham City. These guards know that Riddler has henchmen and he knows who these guys are. He's going to send for them to be killed.
Yeah, he doesn't have to be escaping to make these things happen, you know. He's got people on the outside.
Yeah, and it kind of calls back to, you know, in year one when he sent his boss the cryptic message, said, do you want this information to go to your family or do you want it to go to Falcone?
To the police. Yeah.
And,
Right. Yeah. Send this to your family or click to send this to Falcone. That's right.
Yeah, it's a lose-lose situation, but they know enough about Nigma to know that he's not joking.
Yeah, he's not fucking around.
No.
Now, this next scene was kind of lost on me at first, but as you said earlier, it makes sense in the end.
Yeah.
Batman is swooping down rainy fire escapes and rooftops while an off-screen voice tells him about his neighbor being murdered. At the end, he meets Gordon by the bat signal. He says that 5 more guards resigned, and he's keeping Riddler in the yard alone. Back at school, the professor is shooting hoops with Edward, asking what he plans to do after he gets into the perfect school, finds the perfect job, and gets the perfect house. He said, you know what you'll want to do? You'll want to be young and free. You'll want what you have right now. And then he gently confronts Edward about the riddle on the test. Because we remember he broke in and stole the key with all the answers. Here he says that he decided to change the question last minute. And yet Edward had the right answer to the old question. Edward begs him not to tell his father. And when the professor refuses, it's like, hey, you know, this is going to be good for you. I'm sorry, but I have to tell him. Edward jumps him from behind. And then after he makes that first strike, repeatedly bashes the guy's face into the asphalt. And then somehow understands the riddle on the test as he's talking. Like this story has really fucked up sequences where he's committing this atrocious violence with such a calm about him that he never really loses focus of what he's talking about. You know, it's more disturbing because of that, you know.
Well, it's also like at that moment, right? He's beating the crap out of the guy and now he has to figure it out. It's like he's at the point of no return. And you have to figure out the answers now. Because if you don't figure out the answers, guess what? You're fucked. And now the answers are making sense. Like, wait, that is the answer to this. It's like now all those smarts and all the stuff that his teacher was talking about that he needs in everyday life just hit him.
Yeah, and this guy is the exact person he needs in his life because obviously he has an abusive household. He's got this weight of oppression walking through school every day. You know, even his A- isn't good enough, you know, and he's like, I'm in the top 3 people in the class. He's like, oh, congrats, you're in 3rd place. You know, like his father is just a prick. And he finally has this guy who really cares and he challenges the way that he's sort of been indoctrinated. Like you have to think one way and you have to act like this. And this guy has been amazing to him, but because he's seeing him as a threat to his established order, you know, I don't know. This is another scene that was shocking yet effective.
You were just tired of getting paddled. You're the reason I'm getting hit, dude. Like
you're taking revenge on the wrong person here, dude.
Yeah. It's sad to see because we see this so many times in our own school systems in real life where kids are bullied on, and in this situation, it was like the bully was his dad.
Yeah.
Who just happens to be the principal schoolmaster. It's never a good thing when someone is under that pressure that they have to fit in, that they're not good enough, that they have to, be perfect.
And imagine being that good and having one of these helicopter parents that's still telling you you're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
You've moved up beyond all the other kids your age and you're still outperforming almost everyone else in the advanced level, and they're still like, yeah, you fucking moron. You still, think this is good enough. Yeah. Jesus.
Your dad still thinks you're an idiot years later.
Mm-hmm.
Circling back to, the dad's conversation with Batman and then the neighbor's conversation with Batman, we can actually see that the person with the inadequacies was actually the father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He fathered Edward with this woman that was, essentially a prostitute.
He had this shame about it.
Yeah. He projected all that on Edward and basically made him into the monster that Edward became, not on purpose, but when you bully someone so bad.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that have a rough household, right?
Yeah.
Or they have a rough time at school. But when those things are just inextricably linked, I can't imagine. You would feel like there's no escape anywhere,
Yeah.
And then you snap.
Look at when he's on the basketball court. He's killed the professor. Look at him standing over the professor, and you're on that basketball court. What does that look like?
Paul Dano killing the mayor?
No. The shadow of the basketball goal, the body, and then the circle looks like the answer.
Oh, it's a fishhook. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. That's clever.
First you eat me, then you get eaten. And Batman answers a fishhook. So if you look at Edward standing over the teacher in the shadow of the goal, it looks like a fishhook.
That's funny.
All right, Mitch, we see you.
Yeah. Another brilliant segue here, because these nice overhead shots from the flashback to the current nighttime view of the prison yard. Batman answers the riddle, and then he accuses Riddler of killing his own mother. He responds that, well, my mother lived to a nice old age, and I didn't panic in a theater and get my parents killed prematurely, And Batman has no reaction, merely asking, should I be impressed? Should I clap?
Yeah, good for you.
He says, you're an idiot.
Yeah, he does. Exactly what his father says, which I love.
You want me to hit you? I mean, he's almost like daring Riddler to just pop off and say more shit.
Oh, shit! Say it again. Say something else. Oh! Say something else. Say something else, nigga.
Yeah, and I like how Clayton Cowles emphasizes the letter, you want me to hit you? Riddler says that he's known Batman's identity for many years and used to sneak into Wayne Manor just for fun. He once said that he stole $1 from the safe just to see if he'd notice. I bet you did, didn't you? He then explains that if Batman ever touches him again, he'll kill one of the Bat family. But then he raises the stakes, saying that, like John Oates, he'll kill a stranger at random, someone completely innocent, unrelated, and it'll all be Batman's fault. He explains that there's a hole in the back gate in a car waiting outside, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. Now, what shocked me here is that Batman simply lets him walk away. He also feels like, kind of like those guards, I believe him, and he's capable. I'm going to wait this out and figure out my next move.
Well, he also knows that if he does just beat him unmercifully right there, and maybe not on purpose, but kill him right there, one, it all falls on Gordon. Two,
right,
it all falls directly on him. And I mean, he's in this caged-in area. He's a rat in a cage right there.
Yeah, he had him on check.
Yeah.
I like that Batman throws a batarang at the basketball. From one scene they were playing basketball, and now present day Riddler is shooting hoops as well.
And it's the Affleck batarang.
Yeah, and he just pops the fucking ball in the air. I love it.
And these panels, of course, there was Killing Joke vibes all through it.
Yeah.
And I think Batman threw that batarang for one specific reason. Riddler was fucking shooting bricks, bro. He wasn't hitting one shot. And then the one shot he was ready to hit, he was like, nah, I ain't giving you that shit, homie. Because the entire time he's talking about his plan and all this crap, and he's shooting bricks. Can you imagine
That's
this?
funny.
Can you watch this? Like,
He gave him the Matumbo, the Bat Matumbo.
he's like, oh, you think you're gonna make one before you leave? Nah, dude. He ain't making a
That's funny.
basket.
So in the following weeks, we see that Riddler's running free. He's killing with impunity, and the cops are too afraid to even observe him. The one time Gordon does a stakeout himself, Barbara calls and says her cats were poisoned the next day. He's kidnapped the governor's kid. He's even made other villains. It mentions Maxie Zeus, and I forget who else, submit to his will. He's no longer a joke in Gotham City.
He killed the wives of the mob bosses.
Right. Yeah. It's like the head of the 5 families. This seems crazy to me because, like, the whole deal was don't touch me or I'll kill people. But then he goes out and kills people. So I don't really get that part.
He had the same conversation with everyone else, though. He was like, listen, I'm untouchable to everyone, and I killed your wife. Now I'm going to talk to you. And it's like, all right, dude, what the hell? You didn't have to kill my wife. You could have talked to me first.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Even the whole bank thing. It's like you walk into a bank, give him whatever he wants.
Yeah, they put out a memo at the bank saying that if he comes in, just give him whatever he wants. Like, all right.
Like, yo, get your banks out of Gotham. What are you guys doing?
So yeah, this scene does throw me a little bit.
No, you're exactly right. How he had told Batman, you touch me, I start killing people. But the people that he killed were not at random.
True.
Yeah, he was killing with a purpose.
Targets just to flex his muscle and show that, he's in control of Gotham. This is his leverage, his power. And then we see Batman standing over the grave of John Oates. It's all boiling up now.
In the final scene, Riddler eavesdrops on Batman with his phone. He says that Riddler surprised everyone when he questioned himself and changed the rules entirely. He said that being smart, though, is also his downfall because this hubris doesn't allow Riddler to see that Batman could change too. And at this point, Riddler realizes he's listening to a recording, and this is not real-time surveillance. Batman is standing right behind him. The last few panels go completely black, just like John Oates' death in the very first scene. And this is far less ambiguous than the end of The Killing Joke, where you could argue one way or another, like, wow, did Batman actually kill the Joker? But I like how King really leans into it here of like, okay, well, we're going to play off that ending and make it a lot clearer that Batman kills this fucking dude. That's the way I read it.
I love the fact that the last piece of dialogue is Batman giving the riddle.
Right. What does he say there?
Though we meet but once, you know me forever after. What am I?
Death.
We got the Sopranos blackout scene with
yeah.
Don't Stop Believing playing.
What a fucking ending.
It was also sad on that scene where Bruce Wayne goes to visit the widow and says, I have some connections with GCPD and I know why your husband was killed.
Oh, right. That's in the montage of him killing all those people.
Yeah.
Again, Bruce Wayne showing that he actually has a human side.
Well, that's an important scene now that you mention it, because I don't think I considered this at the time. This must inform his decision because he's talking to the widow and it's like he changed the rules of the game. Batman didn't understand or whatever. And she's like, isn't it his job to fucking understand? Isn't it his job to fucking think like these guys and figure this out? And I think that that's probably the catalyst in him going, maybe I have to do the only thing that he won't expect me to do.
Yeah, and even when the mother talks about how the daughter has issues, she enjoys playing soccer, but yet she has some anxiety about playing soccer. And the little girl will tell her mother, she says, she'll say to me in that perfect kind of tween tone where you think they understand everything, but they don't know anything. She says, Mom, I'm not stupid. It's a game when you watch it. But when I have to play it, then it's just me.
I like that.
I think right there, that's probably when Bruce was like, I got to do this.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad that you called out that scene. I want to talk about pros. What do you guys have that you liked about it?
Well, I love the artwork, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mitch has always been one of my best. It seems like first Tom was given the role of being the writer on the main Batman run with David Finch. And I love David Finch. David Finch is like an icon. And
yeah, he's incredible.
those first couple of books were really good. But for some reason, when Tom and Mitch work together, that is the dynamic duo. That it's kind of like Snyder and Capullo and Alan Grant and Norm Brayfogle. It's just
right. There's a shorthand there that they understand.
Mitch makes Tom's writing that much better. He, the whole fishhook thing, all that stuff, he fills in the cracks.
Yeah, I was a big fan of the art in Killing Time as well, David Marquez. But, we talked in the last one, Riddler Year One, about, we have one artist, again, doing everything, just like in this one. And it feels like a singular vision, like they're both so in sync with each other. Both this story and the last one we covered definitely feel like one cohesive thought.
Right. I've only met Mitch once, and it was at this last year's Dallas Fan Expo. And I was grateful that he signed my copy here. And I was just asking him, I was like, do you ever get a script from Tom where you just think, man, that is so effed up? And he's like, all the time, man. So,
that's funny.
But yes, definitely the artwork. I love the artwork. Like I mentioned, the sequence where it shows the father headmaster spanking him with a book. I mean, you could feel the rage.
That really gets you going, huh?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
You like that part?
You mentioned the color palettes. It goes back and forth between the greens and the
reds,
the blood orange.
Yeah, I have to agree with everything you just said, Gramps. They are spectacular. Mitch clearly knows exactly what he's doing. The Batman and Robin, the Tom and Mitch, when they work together, it's like it just sinks. They've been working together for so long that you read the story and you look at the art. You read the story, you watch the art, and you're reading and you're picturing exactly what you probably be picturing if you just read with no art attached to it.
Right.
It just makes it easier to read. And the biggest positive I got on this, I'm happy it's a one shot. Because I think if you were to give Tom like a 4 or 6 issue thing, we're reading a lot of other things that will just get lost and confused.
Well, yeah, and this is one of those, like, I don't know, 80-page specials or something. Can you imagine if this was 3 or 4 issues? I don't think it would be as enjoyable at all.
Yeah, the biggest one for me, well, the biggest, everything's the biggest, right? It's because I'm 6'7".
Because you're the biggest.
I'm the biggest. The fact that there was a lot of like Killing Joke references and, using the 9 panels and just a lot of that is when I was reading this, I'm like, wow, this feels like I'm reading another version of the Killing Joke, but with a different villain. And
and I think that's
made it so
why
fun.
this is such a good first issue.
Yeah. It was perfect.
Because it not only has the story connectivity, but the way that it's plotted visually is like everything is a subtle tie-in.
And I think I won Eisner, and after reading it, I'm like, well, that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Eisner Award winners include Riddler, One Bad Day, Tom King, Mitch Gerrads. That's cool. Good for them.
Wow. Maybe that's why I just kept hearing more and more about it.
And now here we are.
I thought it was clever that the One Bad Day series, I was like, okay, whose bad day are we talking about here?
Yeah, there's a lot of bad days.
Clearly it's the kids.
A lot of bad
but then
days.
also,
Well, for him, it's the basketball court,
Yeah.
Sure.
I think that's the turning point for sure.
Shooting those bricks.
Not that basketball court. Something to do with, I don't know, murdering your own professor. But yeah, for me, the pros, as we mentioned, artwork, the tie-ins to the other stories, whether it's a visual cue or written, I think those are all very well done. But also very strong opening and closing scenes. Aside from sort of the extra dialogue that I commented on earlier, I think that first shot in the surveillance footage and, the splash page and all that, very strong opening. And then we have a very strong closing reminiscent of Killing Joke. So I think all that's kind of essential. Any kind of good storytelling, you want to have a strong opening, a strong ending, and everything in between to hold your attention. So I really think that in terms of the outline, very well plotted story.
Agreed.
All right, cons. What do you guys have that you might change here?
That's a tough one, man.
Well, I think we alluded to in the earlier is how sometimes through the narration and the speaking over certain panels, I didn't know who was talking until I had to get like a page, 2 pages on, and then realize, okay, he's talking to this person or this person is talking to him. I'm a dumb reader, okay? And I need everything explained to me up front, but this is one of those books that kind of challenged me a little bit because I had, it wasn't all spelled out for me. And Tom King is notorious for that. He doesn't like to explain things. He will show you eventually. He plays that slow burn game.
Yeah, and I'm a very literal person. So sometimes, when people are dealing in a little too much metaphor or they're planting seeds but not explaining shit, that I get frustrated too.
Yeah, and I'm talking specifically about that part where it was the neighbor that was explaining to Batman about.
Yeah, when we got to the end of that scene, I was like, what the fuck was the point of that?
Yeah.
And then 3 pages later, you're like, oh, okay.
Right. I wish that they had done a little color coding on the narration.
Yeah, because it's like, can you do a setup without making it feel like a fucking setup, I think that's probably the way that I would put it, because okay, well, that amounts to nothing. None of this means anything to me. I will put that in the back of my mind and hope that it comes back later, right? That's not great storytelling. It's rewarding later when you figure it out.
Yeah.
But if you had to sort of suffer along through it, I mean, thankfully it was a very short part, but if there was too much of that, it's like watching an indie film or something where you're like, oh my God, just get to the point. Sometimes I needed a little more straightforward,
Right. And this is not a very linear story. I mean, we've got a lot of flashbacks, and that's kind of expected if this is going to be being an origin story for Riddler.
Yeah.
This is our second origin story for this character, back-to-back episodes, which is cool.
I know.
Yeah. A lot of times I'm not a big fan of the jumping back and forth and timelines and stuff like that, but when it's done good, it works. Like you said, if this had been a 3 or 4 issue story, I would have already checked out by issue 2.
Yeah. Like, wow, that part was really cool, but this is kind of a drag.
Yeah.
I do think that doesn't detract from my enjoyment too much, but it does jump back and forth a little more than I'd like. It doesn't quite feel all over the place, but again, it could have been streamlined a little bit in a couple parts, or even just a little bit less. Just a little bit less. I always think this when I'm reading comics. Writers, we like to write and we like to connect words in a really fun and interesting way. But I think sometimes I wish that they would self-edit a little bit more. You'll hear someone say, I think back to the scene in Birdman. I don't know if I've referenced this on the show before, but there's a great scene in Birdman where they're doing a play.
Here's the thing. You've got 4 lines after that all say the same thing. I didn't even know the man. I only heard his name mentioned in passing. I wouldn't know. But the point is, you don't know the guy. Right. We fucking get it. Yeah. Make it work with 1 line. I didn't even know the man, right?
Yeah, right.
And that is how I think about dialogue when I'm reading comics, when I'm watching a film. I'm constantly thinking like that because I'm a writer. Mm-hmm. And I know it's fun to word vomit. And so I try to cut all my shit out. I try to cut down the filler. Same way I edit this show. I'm rambling right now and I'm going to trim it down. So, I would love to see a little bit just kind of a less is more approach. And I think, Tom King, Scott Snyder, these guys that are great writers that do sometimes get in their own way a little bit with the dialogue.
I don't disagree with that. I will say that, and this is strictly my opinion, but one of the critiques of Tom's writing when he first came on with the Batman is that people were just like, there's no dialogue in these stories. It's just action, 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 a little bit of dialogue, then action, action, action.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think over the years, especially after, the success that he's had, he wrote Mr. Miracle with Mitch and all this stuff. He's really getting his legs under and confidence under him to include and write more dialogue.
Okay. So that's more of a current Tom King style than a traditional.
Yeah, and he's still doing it in his way where, at first you're like right in the middle of a scene and you don't know what's going on. And then the moment fleshes out and you can see, okay, here's the big picture. Here's what's going on. He does that a lot over and over and over.
Yeah.
And it's got traits of, cinematic writing. Is that even a word, phrase? I don't know.
We're going to say yes.
Make me sound smart. It's what they do in TV shows.
All right. So, hey, what is your final rating? I want to start again with Dunk.
Oh, man. Me again? Last week's was did I give it like a 9.5, something ridiculous?
Oh, ignore that.
Oh, well, I was just thinking because now I have to gauge it. Like, I really enjoyed last week's book because it like went in with the movie. And I agree with what you guys said. I think we all are in agreement that there's too much dialogue. But that's just what Tom King writes.
Sure.
Is it out of 10 or
out of 5? And you can use half stars.
Yeah, I guess I do. I'm gonna go with a 4.
Yeah.
Although I really enjoyed it. Thank God it was just one issue.
Yeah.
Had some basketball in there, although no one made a shot, so I'm kind of disappointed.
Well, they'll have to write you into the next one.
I'll be dunking. I'm not going to be like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. Boink. No, I'm like, this is what I'm going to do, Batman. 2 hands.
You go full cable guy and shatter the glass on the backboard.
But yeah, I'll give it it's a solid 4. I'm happy that it won the Eisner off of one issue. Again, the Batman and Robin combo. When you got Tom and Mitch writing something, you're going to enjoy the art. You are going to enjoy the story. You have to go through the dialogue and think about and think to yourself, what's going on right now? Because Batman's jumping from buildings and this person is talking about a woman who's taking care of their cat. I have no idea what the hell's going on. And you just got to read through it and enjoy it. And then at the end, like, oh, wait. Oh, that's the woman. Oh, okay, that's what that is. And it's tough, but a 4.
Fair. Gramps, what say you on your incredibly weighted scale?
Well, first, riddle me this. What can you hold in your hands but hurts to touch?
My dick.
These nuts.
Oh, okay.
All right,
well,
close enough.
Yeah.
I do like the fact that we get to see a more human, empathetic side of Bruce.
Yeah.
That adds so much weight into the final outcome. What did I give year 1? I gave it a 3 out of 5, and I felt the scorn of the host here.
Well, hey, it wouldn't be a Bat Fanatic rating segment if we didn't fight about it. So, we're carrying on tradition at this point.
Yes. In this book, we got a little more Batman. We got a lot more Batman. And we got Batman doing Batman stuff. We got Batman drive-by bataranging dudes. We got Batman dodging bullets straight to the face.
Dude, that shotgun scene was awesome.
We got to see Batman battering a basketball.
Speaking of schoolyard bullies, geez.
Yeah.
That's my ball.
All the rest of the inmates are going to go out the next day and be like, oh, man, who popped the fucking basketball?
But check out this battering guy.
Dude, check out the battering.
I can fucking saw through the gate.
I mean, and this was gritty. This was a really gross book. I mean, we got a headshot. We got some fingers turned into sausages. We got dead lady. I mean, this was a really grotesque book. They really went for it.
But they also just, fortunately, you just kind of glimpse it. You're not feeling like Harvey Dent running out of Birthday Boy's chamber in Earth One, like traumatized,
But we see Michael Stipe laying on the ground while these guards are shooting each other, and the blood is intensifying on his face and building. I was like, ooh, that's sick.
It's how the PG-13 gets away with all the violence.
Yeah.
It's right there, but you're not quite shoving my face in it.
Yeah. Would I recommend this book to someone? Yes. So I'm going to give it, like Dunk said, a 4. I'll give it a 4 on the fact that we've got more Batman in it, Batman doing Batman stuff in it. It's a unique spin on a character that I don't know if I've seen him do this type of stuff in too many stories or any other stories. But
yeah,
I like the dynamic, the play between the two, the weird dialogue stuff aside. Once you get your head around it and understand where he's going, I see where both Tom and Mitch really went for it, and I'll give it a 4.
Well, I'm going to be boring as shit because that's what I wrote down too.
Okay.
I was kind of
Fours across the board, ladies and gentlemen.
unanimous. You know,
You were expecting lower of me?
well, yeah. After last time I was, because to me, Riddler Year One is stronger than this. It's more consistent. I don't really have hardly any gripes about that one at all, but they also have a lot more to play with in terms of page count. You know, there's a lot more you can do with that story. And this one is, you know, a different intention. But yeah, I think I weighted higher for the story outline and the artwork. I detract a little bit just for those things that I mentioned about the writing. But yeah, it's a solid 4 to me. That's our first unanimous score. So there you go.
Ding, ding,
Down in
ding.
the record books.
Season 4, all 4s.
All right, that is our show. Thank you guys so much for listening. Again, we are several episodes deep into the recording, so we'll keep rolling these out, and I've been having more and more fun each time. So thanks for checking it out. Give us that 5-star rating and a quick review if you want to show some love. You know, share when we post about new episodes. Let people know that we're out here and help us continue to grow. Now, we will return with a comic book film, as we are prone to do. As I mentioned before, we're going to do one comic, then one Bad Day comic, and then a movie. And the movies we're going into this season are the OG granddaddies of the genre. That's right, we're picking up next time with Richard Donner's Superman the Movie.